So I'm Cheryl Delson. I am the IBC SLO coordinator, and this presentation is on evolving perspective on SLOs. So I used butterfly, PowerPoint, purple. I'm a girl, and I liked it. And I thought butterflies evolve from one type of entity to another. So this is what I wanted to project for SLOs. The majority of my presentation is taken from David M. Marshall, PhD, who is the SLO coordinator at UC San Bernardino. And he did a presentation at the SLO workshop in February at Miracosta. And so he said we can use this information. And so a lot of this information that he presented, I'm using and adapting to IBC. So just to kind of get an idea, who's from Saddleback? Okay, so you got two. You're two from Saddleback. Okay. So I'm going to. This is the overview of what I want to cover today. The focus is going to be on the idea of accreditation focused versus student focused SLOs. Then at the end, I wanted to talk about, at least for IBC, our SLOs, how they're related to program review, which is related to resource requests. Okay, and then finally sustainability, or aka habit, of how we can get into the habit of doing SLOs. So my goal for this presentation was born out of my conversations with people that I've talked to about SLOs. We're very much in a mindset that we have to do them. We have to do them. It has to be done. I'm going to be not evaluated on SLOs, but evaluated if I do them. It's very much I have to do this. And a lot of faculty I talk to do not like being told what to do. I don't like being told what to do. So when I talk to a faculty member because they're struggling with it, they don't want to do it, and because they don't want to do it, they're struggling with it. And so what I've been trying to project my own personal view on SLOs is how can you make it so it works for you? Make it so it's something that you can use, not just that you have to do. And so this is where some of the ideas I've come up with working with people, and I'll give you some ideas and things that I've come up with after really talking to faculty members. Okay, so this is based on this accreditation student focused, and some of it's based on how I perceive SLOs and how they should work for us instead of making us having to do it. Okay, so this idea of accreditation focused versus student focused. This is where we are. This is my life right now. I just had to write, over spring break, I had to write the SLO part of our 2014 annual report. I spent spring break doing that. The results from that report showed that I'm publicly saying this, that we are only at 77% of our classes have results in them. So now my job is to go and contact all those departments and say, this class doesn't have a result, this class doesn't have a result, this class doesn't have a result. How is that actually helping students? It's not. It's me nagging, me being mommy, going, you got to do this. This has to happen, okay? But what I want to do is I want to move it from here. So this one shows that we write outcomes, identify assessment, gather results, but instead of using the results for your students, for yourself, for coming up with resources, we're packaging the results into a way where we can then submit reports. That's what we're doing. We have our self-assessment next year. And so the whole thing, the 77%, we've got to get that up for our self-assessment. But how is that helping our students? Okay, so the goal is we name expectations of learning, communicate the expectations to the students, collect student work, determine extent of learning, and then strategize new student success plans. Okay, so this is doing the same thing, but now we're looking at the students instead. So how can we use SLOs to do that? So this idea, this comes from this gentleman from Cal State San Bernardino, of the culture of intentionality. It's student learning central, seeks information about how well the students are learning, reflects on what we teach and how we teach it, and then we accept responsibility for student learning. Some responsibility. I mean, we can't accept all responsibility for the students, but we have to be able to admit we do accept some of it. And then experiments with new strategies for student success. I added this last one, including teaching methods. This is where I see how you could use SLOs to experiment with new media, social media, you know, the idea that you have to meet criteria, because we have that at Saddleback. Do you guys use TrackDown? Okay, so you have that criteria met, criteria not met. You know, as educators and people that grade, everybody wants to get that criteria met. We met the criteria. To me, that's not the point of SLOs. If you're meeting criteria all the time, you need to change that SLO so that you're not meeting the criteria. That's where you're going to collect your data. That's where you're going to find out if something's working or it's not. It's the opportunity to do your experiments. It's like, okay, I want to use Twitter in my class. So I'm going to make an SLO to see how all that works. Okay, it didn't work. Move on to something else. But it gives you a way to not only experiment, but then to show whether or not it was successful. So if you want to take it, it's like, hey, we used Twitter, it was great. And then you can go to another class, present at something like this and say, hey, we used Twitter, look at our data. You know, your program review, you have data. It's a great way to collect data, and there's a storage facility, as TrackDown is, only a storage facility for that data. Does that make sense? That's how I view SLOs. It's a safe way to experiment because you have to do it anyway. This comes from the Assessing Student Learning, a Common Sense Guide by Linda Sucky. So SLO students, learning outcomes are goals that describe how a student will be different because of the learning. I love that statement, how they will be different. What have you done in your class or your program that will make the student different from when they enter? How are you contributing to their learning, to their lives, to their experience in the world, okay? And then learning outcomes are the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and habits of mind that students take with them from a learning experience. So how you are helping the student. So this is where the SLOs, you know, the kind of the ideal of where we want SLOs to go. Okay, right now when you hear SLOs, whenever I'm presenting at a department meeting, it's like, okay, where's the fruit? Keep it back, you know, don't throw them at me. SLOs are very much associated with a negative connotation right now because we are so much, you have to do this, you have to do this. And I really want to change that by providing some of these, this is how I view SLOs. And we'll see. So this is one of the things that I really believe in, and I've seen coming from ACCJC, and I just said that we're not trying to do it accreditation focused, but student focused. But one of the things ACCJC has been pushing is an SLO student website, which we don't have. Saddleback has a public-facing SLO website, but I am convinced that students need to know what SLOs are, if only a definition. If they hear an SLO, they are so educationally driven at this point. They're like, what's an SLO? Am I going to be tested on that? Do I have to do another test for this? What the hell is this thing that you're talking about? So by providing them straightforward information gives them a clue as to what to do. But also by making explicit of what will be expected of them, and so that they don't have to, as I said, they don't have to intuit what the learning experience is going to be. We had a student on our SLO task force last year who was very involved with SLOs, with our SLO task force. It was great. And we asked him about this. It's like, do you guys want to know what SLOs, especially for programs? He's like, I want to know if this class is going to prepare me for this class, it's going to prepare me for this class, so that when I graduate, I can go and be successful. I want to know that these classes are going to help me. He's like, he was really passionate about that. And that's what the last one, students can see the connection between courses and programs. They can see how they're related and how this class is going to help them be successful with this class. It makes sense to them so that they feel like they're in control of their educational progress. All right. So remaking, remaking. I put making, remaking. This is where I expected the fruit to come. So we had a big push to get all our SLOs in, and we have, the majority of our courses have SLOs. But we need to go back now and relook at them to find out, what are we doing? Did we just throw something in there to get it done so we have our numbers up, or are they student focused? Okay, so this is where I would like to go with our next phase of student learning outcomes. So for example, upon completion of physics, let me go back. So the different components, and use this where you have ABC of a learning outcome. Audience to whom the SLO pertains, what the audience is expected to know or be able to do, so their behavior, and then the contents, the circumstances under which the learning will take place. So this is the example. Upon completion of Physics 4C, students will apply the laws of thermodynamics to solve relevant problems in physics. Okay, so this is an example that he used. So A, the students, and this is the biggest thing he said during his presentation. All the SLOs have the word student in them. Okay, program SLOs, maybe not because you're doing a whole program, but the SLOs have the word student in them because they're student focused. Okay, and then B, apply the laws of thermodynamics, and then how are they going to do that, or where they're going to do that in Physics 4C. So there's the ABCs of the learning outcome. So this provides a direction that we can use. So some of the SLO pitfalls, some of these things is what I have come across, and some of these were new to me when he brought them up, but I have found this to be true, that SLOs can be too wordy, okay? And if the wordy, it makes them difficult, okay? So one of the things I've really found that is that a lot of people try to make SLOs a lot more difficult than they have to be. Make them a lot more wordy, complicated, multiple assessment methods for the same SLO. So by making things concise, be wary of adding too many outcomes in a single statement. So just one thing. Procedural statement. So, to aware of the assessment possibilities for each outcome. So if you have a procedure that you want them to learn, so be aware of that. And unmeasurable outcomes. So be conscious of assessment possibilities for each outcome. And then too many outcomes. For every outcome, there must be a means of measurement. Okay, so is there any math people in here from our math? From our math? Are you from? Okay. Our math department has a godly number of SLOs. But they want to do one, and I was thinking about it's going to take 10 years to assess all their SLOs. So they want it, that's how they want it. It's their department, they get to do that way, but you may be cautious about too many outcomes. All right, so features of effective SLOs. Focus on learning, not processes or assignments. Okay, so the assignment can come later. Avoid vague verbs and use action verbs. So you guys have all heard of the Bloom's taxonomy, that's what we use for this, but use action verbs. And I'm sure a lot of this is familiar. You've seen this as part of it, but it's just a good reminder. Use verbs that reflect the level of learning. So at a community college, that may be just understanding. That may be one of the lower verbs, but we need to be reflective of what it is that's realistic for that class. Ensure that outcomes are observable and measurable, and then state what students do, not what the instructors do. Really want to emphasize that. We're measuring student learning, not how well we teach. We're not evaluating ourselves. So it is, it is consequence of what we do and how students learn, but it's not explicitly what we do. There could be outside factors as well, and I wanted to talk about that later. So here's just, I found this really pretty, I thought it was a very pretty Bloom's taxonomy image, and I wanted to include it. It's very pretty.
Kind of zen.
It is. It made me feel happy when I saw it, as opposed to a lot of the times I see Bloom's, and as librarians, Lydia's a librarian at Saddleback. It's like, we've seen Bloom's since we started library school. It's just like, oh. Although not you, because you're Kellogg and you love that stuff. Okay, so process of questions. This is one of the ways that we can help identify student learning outcomes and help move from accreditation-based to focus-based. So what do we want the students to know, understand, and be able to do? This is our SLO, okay? I have a little extra SLOs on there. That's extra. So what do we want them to know, understand, and be able to do? This is where you can start experimenting with your teaching methods, with adding new content or adding different ways to teach from the core. for your SLOs. So the next part, where do students learn what we expect them to learn? This is part of what what was introduced to me, is curriculum mapping. We do this by mapping our courses in TrackDad to our PSLOs. Okay, so our program and learning outcomes. So what we do is in TrackDad, there's a little checkbox next to our course. So we have the student learning outcome number 1. Then next to it, there's a section next to it that says, okay, these are all program student learning outcomes, and we can say this one goes to this one, this one goes to this one, this one goes to this one. Then, consequently, our program is being evaluated every time we evaluate that course. Does that make sense?
Question.
Yeah.
Could you share the PowerPoint so I can just concentrate on what you are doing?
Yeah, I did not print any of them up, but we will put them on. Yeah.
We'll post them.
We'll post them all. Yeah.
Okay.
And it has all my contact information on there too if you want to talk about it later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah. So,
We mapped the ISLOs to.
yes. But, yeah. Just stay out of this. Okay, so program SLOs. And then we have course SLOs. So let's say we have SLO number 1, SLO number 2 for physics. Okay, and then over on, so this is for the courses. And then we have the program SLOs. I do want to put this for physics. And so we have PSLO number 1 and PSLO number 2. So as we are evaluating our SLOs for our class, so this will be like 4C. Okay, this one will be for that, this one will be for that as well, and this one will be for that. So we evaluate these, we assess these, then this program, physics, has also been assessed by default. Okay, so that's what we consider mapping. This is a very indirect form of mapping, and it's not very accurate.
Do you have to have every PLO, PSLO, like in the SLOs or course?
Not per course.
No.
No,
it's
so-
sunlight, right?
Yeah, so, but every PSLO has to have a course SLO mapped to it, but every course SLO has to map to every PSLO. Yeah, but they do have to relate so that we don't just have a program SLO that has no course mapped to it, because then that program SLO is not being addressed anywhere. And that's not. And then, like Kathy said, she's helping me. But then we have SLOs also mapped to our institutional SLOs, which at IVC are also our general education SLOs. They're combined together. Okay, so they do map. So we do have SLO courses mapped to our instructional SLOs as well. So, and that's all part of the, when I'm talking about, for the curriculum mapping, and this will work for GE as well, but on a much bigger scale, is that if you have physics 4C, 4A, and 4B, and they have different, they could have all of the same SLOs, but each SLO is going to be evaluated differently. And I'm going to show you that in a little bit.
One more
Yeah.
question, similar to the previous one. Could you have SLOs that don't go to PSLOs but go to ISLO, general
Yeah.
education?
Yeah.
And you would agree with this? Okay.
Yeah,
That's what I
yeah.
thought, there should be
And-
such.
There should be, yeah, and all ISLOs should have SLOs mapped to them. Yeah, and they do.
No, but I'm saying without going to the program.
That's,
But like general education.
No, I
Does it
understand.
have to have
The
a
thing is
program
that-
or not?
well, it doesn't have to be in, it doesn't have to map to a program. It can go only to ISLOs. The problem
Yeah.
is that that won't be very many of those
No.
because of the state curricular requirements that make it much harder to have courses, to offer courses, to hold them in our catalog that are not associated with a specific program,
They could-
right?
Yeah, they
So although it's possible and feasible and reasonable and logical, it's not likely to occur very often.
But there could be a situation that some PSLO, some student, just SLO, course SLO, would go to some programs for some students and only do an adaptation for other students.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
For example,
So
I mean, people take courses that are not, that are in a program, but are not pursuing that program.
Yeah.
For that student, it's only relevant as a GE. But the course itself,
So you would
we
still
don't
list
have
it.
very many courses that are not
Okay.
tied to programs, although certainly we can.
So you would list it as, so when it's related, when that SLO would be listed as for program and directly as for ISLO.
Right, it doesn't go to the ISLOs through the program. It goes to the program and it goes to the ISLOs.
Okay.
But there is some courses like that, like in the library, we have 3 library courses. And our program is considered basically our reference desk and the circulation desk. So the courses don't necessarily line up with our whole general mission is to provide information to students, but those may go directly to the ISLOs because we don't have a certificate program or anything like that.
Yeah,
So that would make sense. All right, so I'm going to cover curriculum mapping a little bit later, but also how well did students learn what you expected to learn. So this is our assessment methods and criteria. So this is how we determine how the students learned and did they learn what we wanted them to. And then finally, how do we know how well they learned what we expected them to? And so using sampling and rubrics is a good way of doing this, and I'll talk to you about this in a little bit. So this is curriculum mapping. This is something, it's a little bit more difficult to read up here, that, and I'm using writing as an example because I really would like writing to do this. But writing, and I wanted to bring a copy of their rubric, but I don't have it, but I can give it to them later, get permission from them later and put it up. They use an extensive rubric for their classes, and every one of their writing classes uses the same rubric. But what I found is that they use the rubric for each class independently. Does that make sense? So they use the rubric and they evaluate the student's work on that rubric for that class. Instead of doing something like this, where I is introduce the SLO, E is emphasize it, and R is reinforce it. So if they use the same rubric for writing 301, the student should fall in a lower category than they would, lower meets expectations and ranking than they would at writing 2. So they can see the progression of students from one level to another. So they have everything in place to do this. It's just a matter of, how can they use this information? And this is where you can get the data of where is it the students are missing out on a certain SLO. It's like they get to writing 2, and they found that they were supposed to have learned something in writing 1, but it's falling through the cracks. So this is where you can get your data and okay, well, what do they need in writing 1 to get that extra piece of information? Oh, it turns out the writing 1 classes that have come to the library, see, I'm using library, have come to the library and done research workshops, or have come to the library to use their computers and have had hands-on compositional exposure with the instructor are doing better. So what does that tell? Maybe the writing classes all need to have computers. So do you see, you can use some of this information to try to get resource. We need computers in the writing classes because it's obviously helping students who are in the writing too. Okay, so students may not meet a criteria, but that means that it gives you an opportunity to open a resource request and say, hey, we need more exposure, we need more computer labs, or we need computers in our writing classrooms because the students are more successful. Okay, we have a computer lab in the library where the EXP class, the 389, comes in all the time. And the librarians aren't there per se, but we come in every now and then and interact with them. So they're getting exposure to the librarians, they're getting exposure to the library, they're getting exposure to working on the computers. I'll go in and help them with technology. So they're getting a multiple experience here just by coming in and using the library. So they're going to be more successful because they have all these additional tools that they wouldn't have gotten in a regular classroom. So this is data you can use, right? And it all is based on not meeting criteria, all right? So then the next part I wanted to talk about is collecting the data. So sampling and rubrics I'm not going to talk about assessments and criteria because you guys have already had that pretty much. But I want to talk about the idea of using sampling and rubrics. So this is how do we know how well they learned and what we expected them to learn. So assess a subset of SLOs in an annual and consistent cycle. So this is what we're talking about in our SLO task force, is instead of doing every course, every section, every semester, to start doing a sampling of those courses, especially for the very large sections like writing, math, and some others. This goes to my idea of sustainability. If you have to get adjuncts to do the assessments and put it in every semester, that might be asking a lot, especially for me, the whole idea of trying to do something at the end of the winter semester with Christmas coming up. I have a son whose birthday is December 20th. That whole time period for me is like blur. You know, asking you, okay, now you need to put in your assessment results. And there's no benefit that I can see unless you are trying to, within those 3 weeks, reorganize your class for the next semester. There's no benefit in doing it and waiting until the end of the year and doing them all together. As long as you are putting in your results, that's what you have done, so that you can read your results, that you can understand them. If you are experimenting with something, that's a different idea. But you know, we're all instructors, all adults. You can make that determination on, okay, well, this didn't work. I'm going to change up my class for the next semester. But we don't teach every class every semester too. So giving faculty the opportunity to wait until summer when things have calmed down a little bit and they get a little bit of breathing room, hopefully will take away some of the pressure of SLOs and make it a little bit more sustainable. Okay? Because if we can't sustain it, it's going to do us no good, right? We have to work towards the CQI, the continuous quality improvement on that rubric that we have. If you guys ever seen that for SLOs from ACCJC? We're at proficient, we need to get to CQI, but if we can't keep this up, if we can't keep putting in our results and using them, we're never going to get there. Okay, so how can we make it a little bit easier for all of us? And as SLO coordinator, I don't want to be looking at your results in December. I want to go to Christmas, I want to, go see the lights. I don't want to be running reports on, okay, who hasn't done it, and then call you up and go, you need to do this. Because that's not fun for anybody, all right? So 3 steps for simple evaluation. So I'm thinking rubrics here. So identify the levels of student performance, superior, good. For 4 levels, you have superior, good, adequate, inadequate. 3 levels, above expectation, meets expectations, below expectations. So these are how the criteria can be evaluated in the student's work. And then define the standards for the program's success, okay? This goes back to my whole concept. I'm trying to get people to understand that meeting criteria is really not where you want to be necessarily. Not meeting criteria is where you have the opportunity for improvement, or the learning moment, right? The teaching moment for us. But this is, you decide what percentage of students will meet or exceed expectations. I actually had an instructor who, when we were identifying the criteria for his class, said, you want 100%. Like 100%. I want 100%. If they don't get 100%, I'm not doing my job. 100%. I'm like, well, what about the students that don't show up? And he did that, 100%. I'm like, what about the students that aren't showing up? Then I'm not communicating well. It's just 100%. I'm like, okay, 100%. That's what you want. But if you put down too low of a percentage of students meeting it, just so that you can meet criteria, that's not really the point of this. So if you get it and you're like, okay, I met criteria, you may need to think about increasing that percentage. Make it higher if that's what you want to do, to see if you can get more students to meet that criteria. So if the goal is to use the information, use it to help our students learn, okay? But for meaningful change to occur, and this is right, once again, this is where we are. It's coming from the administration. They push me to meet the percentages, to get everything into track data, to run the reports. That's where I'm getting my direction from. But I have to admit, this year, the faculty has really jumped on board. I have more people in my SLO task force this year than ever before. I have people coming to my SLO task force because they seem to want to. Diana is there, so she provides a lot of entertainment, so that's always good. It's fun. It's Diana and I are the only girls, and the rest are boys, and she can make them blush. It's awesome. It's so much fun. But we have I think every department has sent their black sheep to the SLO task force because it's very fun. We end up watching videos at the end. But we need to have the faculty more involved because we have to do this. I'm going to go back to that. We have to do SLOs. We can either take it on ourselves and do it, or we can have the administration tell us what to do. So making it student-centered, trying to figure out how you can make SLOs for you, takes the sting away from it. Trying to figure out how to make it sustainable makes it so we can do it. Okay? So now I want to that was the end of David's information. This was the last, he had talked about this, but I thought it was very, very important that we really look at who's driving SLOs, because we have to do it. It's not going away. Our last annual report, about a third of it was on SLOs. So it's getting more and more part of the annual report, so it's not going away. So we need to figure out what is our role in SLOs. This is how I like to, and this is for IVC. I don't know how Saddleback does their resource requests. But our resource requests are tied to our program reviews, and our program reviews have SLO components in it. So you have a section in there that has, where you have to type in your student learning outcomes for your program, the results, and any information in there. It's very much faculty contributed. We get to type in what information we want. It doesn't get pulled from TrackThat. We type it in, okay? So they're part of the program review. But then the program review objectives and strategies are an essential part of the departmental resource request. When we're doing resource requests, we have to refer to our objectives and strategies in order to rationalize why we're asking for money, okay? So my head went to, okay, I have SLOs that I have to do anyway. I want a scanner in the library. How can I manipulate my survey that I do in the library to show that students need scanners, right? And then show this many % of students want alternative methods for document delivery. You know, and I put it in my SLOs. I put the SLOs in my program review, and then I open up a resource request, and we got approved, and we're going to get a scanner for the library. Okay, so it's how we're using our SLOs to get what we want for the students. Okay, by asking them. In the library, we do surveys, other things. I was talking to one of the electrical technology, the guys who's doing the solar decathlon. Is that electrical or electronic?
Electronic,
Electronic?
isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so he came to talk to me, we were talking about this, and he just wanted help with his program review and his SLOs, and so we were talking about, like, well, what can you do with your SLOs? And he's like, well, I'm teaching this class, but I don't have the right equipment, so I don't know how the students are going to succeed. I'm like, there's your SLO right there. The students need this material in order to succeed. They're not meeting criteria because they don't have the right equipment to do it. It's not about us teaching, but it's about the resources available to the students. I had another from Human Development who came and said, I just did the same SLO assessment for my honor students and my regular students, and the results were drastically different. Should I drop one of them? I'm like, oh no, this is a perfect example of how maybe your other students need to have additional courses. You need this kind of data to show the discrepancy in honors versus regular. What does the honor students have that your regular students don't? What can they use? So this is where you can pull information that you're getting from your SLOs to help your students. Okay? The other thing I'm bringing up with program review is that we actually have a SLO website that I had to create. I had to do it in 15 minutes. I don't think Kathy's seen this before. This is where, you know, I didn't ask permission from the Academic Senate or any other faculty. I just went to Nathan and said, Nathan, I need a website. This is not linked anywhere.
You go, girl.
Yes.
You will be visited.
I will be spanked later. So this was created. It's not linked anywhere, but it has, I just put up a very, it's not linked anywhere, not until we kind of get faculty improvement. But ACCJC asked for this website.
Right.
This is the second time they asked for it. The first time we said not available. The second time we went, okay, we should have a website. So what I put on here is just a basic description of student learning outcomes. And this goes back to, I think students need to know what a student learning outcome is. If we are doing this to them, they need to know what it is. What ACCJC wants, and now I'm talking about their accreditation again, but what they want is they want us to put program results up on our webpage for students to see. I see that as a benefit for students. But if you put it as part of your program review and track that, we can pull that information. You have control over what's being put in there. So it still can be faculty driven, faculty contributed, but then the students get an idea of, okay, here's the student learning outcome, here's what the course and the programs are going to look like for me. When they're trying to choose which courses that they want to take, they may not know the difference between accounting and management. You know, we know, but they may not. You know, it may be something as simple as that, and this will help them with that. So the more knowledge we can give to our students about what we're doing, the better I think they're going to be. And we do have control over what we put on there. So it doesn't have to be a question. Oh, sorry.
I was reviewing some other colleges' websites, not for SLOs particularly, and some student services area, and I saw a lot of the departments put their SLOs up. You could open up the PDFs, you could see what 1, 2, and 3 are, or whatever,
Yeah.
and their results. So is that something that other campuses will be implementing? I mean,
I think just about every community college has that, except for us.
I haven't seen ours on there, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, it depends what, like, for example, Palomar
Math
has.
department has it posted on their folder.
Yeah.
It's on their web page, so it's publicly available.
There's a big problem with that if we're talking about courses without multiple sections. Because there's a push by the ACCJC, by the accreditation people, to use SLO evaluations. Not that a faculty member has participated, but the actual results of the SLO evaluations and assessments, to use that as part of a faculty member's evaluation. And when we publicize SLO results from courses with a single instructor teaching them, then we're actually publishing information that may be damaging to a faculty member's career, and there are problems with that. With multiple sections, it's not a problem because it's all smushed together, but with some of our courses where there's only one instructor or even only 2 instructors, it can get to be pretty problematic.
Yeah.
When I was looking at student service areas, so it was just the departments versus a course, and they would list those down and they would have the results as what the results were and what they're planning to be doing to make changes or whatever. Right.
And then
There are also
that goes to the
great
program
distribution,
review.
but there's also great distribution data that are available and informed that'll give, I think, more valuable information. One of the problems that I have with what Cheryl's talking about, not with Cheryl, but with what Cheryl's talking about, is that we have learning objectives that define, in fact, the entirety of a course. And every instructor who teaches a particular course is required to fulfill all of those learning objectives. The SLOs that are assessed are, by design, a small subset of those learning objectives. In fact, they don't even usually encompass one entire learning objective, let alone all of the learning objectives for a course. So when we focus on that as a way for an instructor or a group of instructors to improve instruction, that's perfectly fine. That's what it's designed for. That's its purpose. When we start sending students over to look at something which is designed and intended to help instructors experiment with an instructional method or an instructional approach or an instructional tool and assess whether that is valuable in a very discrete, narrow, well-defined portion of a course. And we direct our accreditors, our evaluators, and our students to look at these as if they represent the course or the instruction, I think it's detrimental to both the use of SLOs in a helpful way in which they could be helpful and are intended to be helpful. And it also is hugely detrimental to our students to direct them to one or a small number of tiny little pinpoints in a course rather than the entirety of the course, which is published in our schedule for every single course as the entirety of the learning objectives from the course outline of record, which legally defines the content and the intentions of the course. I think it's hugely detrimental to our students. It's like telling them to look at this room, but they only get to look through this little bitty hole. And I commend Cheryl for all of her work. I think she does a fantastic job. We have to do this. It can be made into a useful exercise. It can be made into something that can in fact help us to improve instruction. The mapping that she described can help us define and ensure that our programs and our institutional SLOs do what we want them to do in terms of covering the ground we intend these composites of courses to cover, rather than having a lot of overlap in one area and missing another. I think the mapping part of them is very powerful. If they're used in the way that Cheryl was describing as a way to improve instruction, I think that can be very valuable if the instructors need this help to figure out how to do it. That's fine. I have no problem with any of that. But the notion that we direct our students to these as if this is where the focus of the course is, I think is misleading and really, well, it's misleading. And anytime students don't know enough to know when they're misled. That's the whole point. Mm-hmm. And to tell them, oh look, instead of looking at all 8 learning objectives that are on the schedule, look at these 3 SLOs that are being assessed. Ooh, no. You don't understand. Your grade is not based on those SLOs. The instruction, those are for the instructor. Your grade is based on the methods of evaluation that are published in the schedule. Your grade is based on evaluating all of the learning objectives. And I think that the ACC-JC and everybody who follows them is doing something really detrimental to our students by focusing them on the SLOs rather than using SLOs for what they are intended.
Which is why I'm showing, I know, and I've heard this all before.
Cheryl and I are fine.
Yeah, oh yeah.
None of that had to do with Cheryl.
Right, and I do agree with Kathy. I'm showing you Palomar's because they have all of their SLOs up here. They don't have results for each of these SLOs. They have them up there for students to see. I'm not recommending we do that. What my recommendation was is that we put the program review results, that we have created and composed and put those results on the web page, not this individual course.
Right.
I still think it's important for students to know what an SLO is if we're bantering it around, if it's going to show up on their syllabus. They're going to see SLOs, they're going to hear you kind of talk about, and then maybe later they're going to want to know what it means. So having a definition and then having something we can post that kind of explains where we want to go with our program and the kinds of things that we have learned and looked at in the program, that's what I want to put on the webpage. Not the course, not, because I agree with Kathy, if we put the
support for those things as well.
Yeah, people are not going to be experimental with their SLOs if they think those results are going to put in there. It's going to be scripted, it's going to be restricted. Okay, so that's what accreditation requirement I put up there. I don't know if it's accreditation requirement. It keeps showing up on these annual reports, so it's getting a little scary.
It's in the legal system at the moment.
Yeah. So I just have one more thing. We're just a little bit, but this is what I really wanted to talk about. Maybe I'll do something later. I've been reading this book because the English people have it on, and I teach their English. This is a great book. It's a lot of fun, but I was thinking, okay, how can we make SLOs a habit? So the cue is you submit your grades, and what I want is to get like a link on the grades submittal page for TrackDat. So you submit your grades, you go into TrackDat, you enter your results into TrackDat at the same time you do your grades. And then what I want to try to do is see if we can get all the instructors that put in their SLO information by this day, we'll put them in a raffle for something. Someone suggested I bring candy to every SLO meeting event I do, so you start associating candy with SLOs. I'm like, dang, I should have thought of that. So, you know, it's like, okay, what is the reward? What can we start doing? And so that was just motivated me from this book, The Power of Habit, which is it's a really interesting read. So we're out of time, but if you have any questions, which you guys have been asking me throughout. My information's on here. We're going to put the PowerPoint on the website. I really wasn't sure how many people were going to come to this, so I didn't print out any.
Saving trees, you didn't do it all.
I did it on Saving Trees. But this is my email address and my extension, and I have SLO office hours 12 to 2 in the cafe over in the library, but I'm in the library every day, so I'm usually available for questions and help.
Wonderful.